So we've touched on a bunch in different ways, alignment between the seeder and the firm, the GP. What about alignment between the seeder and the investors that ultimately the whole point of the seed deal, or at least a significant point of it for both sides, is capital formation and wanting the seed investment to be seen as something that's very positive and not something that somehow is going to actually be, augment the type of risk that an allocator needs to think about, or otherwise just adding variables that they have to consider. And so, presumably the alignment story is part of how an allocator who is going to allocate to a seeded fund can check the box and know that they don't need to worry all that much. But what are some things you guys think about in that regard?
Yeah, I go back to a couple points before, which is our business model is structured in a way to institutionalize the founder early on, de-risk the proposition for the institutional asset owner, because they're not compensated to take on new business risk, and then effectively accelerate their growth. And Cesar touched on this as well. Our partners talk a lot about time machining the business. You can slog through for the next 10 years and maybe get to vintage 2. Hopefully if a seeder comes in and backs it, there's a little bit of a stamp of approval there. It gets to this catalyzation of an event, creating some scarcity value. Some people say it's the first vintage, or your portfolio is deblinded in some way. But backing with from an institutional group typically helps catalyze the business as well. And then hopefully we're off to the races. So when we think about the types of things that we're bringing to the table and the risks associated with it, it's creating this momentum for other asset owners to say, yeah, I'm in. I'm sure a lot of you all have been out there raising capital, and you meet with an endowment or foundation, and they say, oh yeah, sounds amazing. Put us on your distribution list. Can I take a look at your quarterly letters? They're there incentivized to sit there and date you for 12 months. They're not incentivized to write the check. And so hopefully a partnership with a seeder can help catalyze something.
Yeah, and not to get too into the weeds, but I think you want to try and get as much upfront seeing eye to eye and sort of how you're going to build this thing as possible, right? So one example, are you okay with them doing separately managed accounts on the side away from their primary fund? Because that's a potential source of revenue, and maybe the only way some investors will invest with them and get to know them. Or do you view it as a distraction and adding complexity risk where you want them focused on the primary product? So you want to be aligned on a lot of those fronts ex ante as much as possible to sort of attack the thing kind of in lockstep.
Yeah, and I think it also provides some degree of comfort around continuity, in that you have, if you're an allocator and you're coming into whether it's at the initial closing or a subsequent closing, that at least one of the investors who's wrote a large check has been deeply incentivized to ensure that the business is going to be around for a long time, that the founder's motivations are, long-term, building a business, having the correct amount of ways to maintain and compensate and incentivize a full-blown team. And so, in some sense, the question that any allocator is going to have, which is, I'm putting my money in a 8 to 10 year product, and I sure really hope that there's going to be someone there to pay a lot of attention to it once we get more than a few years out. A lot of that work has already been done in terms of the ordinary seeder underwriting process. And so, again, it's an aspect of the overall story. When you have a seeded fund, for investors, they should be able to take a tremendous degree of comfort that not only, to hit the housekeeping seal of approval again thing, but also that some of the other types of concerns that they're going to have, particularly in a long duration fund, will be managed.